Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday, but more importantly, Tony in the green room, you just said it's another national holiday. What holiday is it, my friend?
I think I saw today that it's National Margarita Day.
Well, cheers.
So salt or no salt, it's a good day for you.
Well, it's Friday. I do live in the Southwest. You know, we serve margaritas at our baseball games and our professional baseball and football and we have little guys that run around with like these ice machine backpacks and they fill up your drinks. It's kind of like that's the way we live here. So yeah.
It sounds pretty awesome. I mean, I just assume National Margarita Day is just for, a day for amateurs. you know.
Oh my God, that's good. Well, with this topic that we have today, we might need some margaritas because we're going to be talking about combating donor fatigue. And, another way to be saying that would be combating donor fatigues because there are a lot of ways that we could be thinking about this and what it looks like and how we really need to be, thinking forward with this. Another thing that we think forward with is these amazing relationships we have with our presenting sponsors. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, which is today, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that join us day in and day out. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, joined by the amazing brain of Tony Beall, Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy. Tony's been with us for, pretty much since the beginning, and he's really one of the great minds in the philanthropic world and thought leadership of what we do in our sector and how we can be better. And so I can't imagine a better person to share my Fridays with. But let's start off with the big thing is like, how do we know when our donors are fatigued? And maybe like, what does it look like? Because we fall in love with our missions and then we're like, well, why aren't they engaging? Or, what do you see with this, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. And happy Friday. So excited to be here again with you. I say it all the time and I'll keep saying it. It's the best part of my week. I really treasure the time with you, Julia, and am really grateful that we have this platform to, help folks be better at the work that they're doing, hopefully so. So signs of donor fatigue. In the green room, we talked a little bit about data. And before you can even kind of recognize the signs of donor fatigue, or if your donors are fatigued, you need to have data and you need to have the appropriate kind of metrics and measurements in place for you to monitor donor activity, so you know whether or not this is happening in your organization. But as kind of listed signs of donor fatigue, Julia could include all kinds of things. He just went off the screen. I was going to name everything on the screen. But lower no response to fundraising appeals. Ta-da! And it popped right back up. Dropping retention rates, fewer recurring donors, and low event participation. And these are, again, all signs of donor fatigue. But we don't know that there's fatigue if we aren't tracking these particular items. So lower no response to fundraising appeals. Really, what does that look month over month, year over year, or quarter over quarter, right? So tracking that data and really looking for trends in terms of how those are performing. Dropping retention rates, again, are you looking every year at the retention rates for your donors? And in a show not too far away, we talked about that and gave a formula to kind of look at what your retention rates are within your organization. So again, these are just some of the signs of donor fatigue. You will potentially hear donor fatigue just in conversation with donors. So listen to the words that they're using, the tone that they're using, to kind of identify through conversation and communication with your donors whether or not they're experiencing fatigue. So just be aware of it and consider these signs. And again, I'm saying it constantly, but consider the ways in which you are monitoring your work. What are your metrics and measurements? How are you collecting data? And make sure that you're taking the time. I understand, bandwidth and development professionals are doing a lot, but
Sure.
taking a look at data is really important time and time well invested in your
Mhm.
work. So make sure you're carving out time to really look at data.
Mhm. I love that you brought this up, and I've got to ask, is this the same environment for a new organization as opposed to somebody that, has been in service longer? Let's say you're an organization and you're under 5 years old. Is this going to be as important as to somebody who's maybe been in service for 25 or 50 years old? Or should we not even think about it that way?
Well, no, I think it's a good point. I think that the older the organization is, in terms of when it was established, the more likely they are to run into this scenario if
Okay.
they are 10, 15, 20 years old. But even at the 5 year mark, you can start to see trends in your donors. And in your first 5 years of operating, it's an excellent time to have these kind of standards of practice in place so that you're collecting data and you have the processes in place to do so right from the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really a great thing to say, you're starting out this way. And so you can track the trajectory of things that are going on. And it's just a healthy way to operate.
Mhm.
But I kind of feel like maybe that's a heavy lift for some, or they don't even think about it in the beginning. But I love what you've brought forward on this. Now let's go deeper and ask the question, why are donors becoming fatigued, and what are we doing? I mean, is it everybody? Is it our sector, or is it our organization? Is it a little bit of both? I mentioned in the green room, man, this start of this new administration has put the nonprofit sector at the forefront of so many discussions, not all positive. And I'm wondering if that's hurting us, if that's making donors just say, "Oh, I can't deal with this," or is it helping them to lean in? That will be revealed, I think. But it's kind of an interesting thing to ask.
Yeah, you're right. It will be revealed. And you called me out in the green room, Julia. You knew I was going to go there. But it's about the relationships that we have with donors and really seeing them as individuals and not not a data point, right? We need the data, but we don't look at our donors as a data point when we think about the ways that we communicate with them and interact with them. So just for the benefit of the folks that are on, maybe enjoying us through the podcast, why donors get fatigued. One might be constantly asked for money. Another is that they don't see the impact of their gift or the work that's being done by the organization. They're not thanked for gifts, confused by other NPOs. Is
Yeah.
there, for lack of a better term, competition in the marketplace? You have many people serving the same community with a similar mission, and they're just confused about which organization they may even be giving to. And then lack of communication. So, again, aren't thanked enough for gifts, lack of communication. But lack of communication is more than a thank you. Lack of communication, when we talk about donor engagement, also means if you are a health serving organization, you may be reaching out to your donors to let them know about new science around whatever that issue is. How are folks or science or individuals making strides in this area and sharing those important newsworthy clips with your donors. So all of those things help prevent donor fatigue because they're meaningful. And I think that that's an important part of the conversation too, is that the communication, folks don't feel overwhelmed by your communication if it's personalized and if it's meaningful.
Right. Yeah, I think that I love that you really brought that up, because I think that we forget in the nonprofit sector how much innovation we're exposed to. We are exposed to research and thought leadership and science and technology as it can relate to what it is that we do, right? And I don't think that we share that enough. And I think it's really powerful as opposed to just, what is the pity party that we could throw to basically flip the script and say, here's what the main thought leaders in our sector are saying, or what do the police find when they engage with this population? What do school teachers see when they engage with that population? I think we can bring some of this information back out. And I think it's really exciting. I don't know about your community, but I've seen in my community over the last 10 years, less personal witness by, and I'm going to use the word victims of whatever the topic is, and more, here's, this scientist that we've flown in, or this community leader. And we're going to talk about the background to what we see going on with this issue that our mission is to work on.
Mm-hmm.
It's very powerful. I think
And
maybe it's fatigue. I don't know, but wow, super powerful.
Yeah, no, it is. And that was such a great example. I mean, I had the real honor of working for two national organizations in the health space. And they both were very good at quarterly bringing in a physician, a scientist, or someone who are working towards a cure or other ways to help folks in that space. But bringing them in and inviting folks to come in and hear a lecture and ask questions, again, super meaningful. And that combats donor fatigue because it energizes them.
Yeah. And I also think that it really elevates a nonprofit to more of a thought leadership position, as opposed to just being really good at soliciting for funds. They're navigating the solutions and the intellectual side. To me, that's like super powerful.
It really is. It's a great example.
And I think that we need to be doing that more often than not. It kind of goes with what you said too. It's not just asking for money. It's indicating why you make these investments. Like, we use the word impact, but it's like literally, what's the fiscal responsibility of the organization to march towards some solutions? And so I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, and you brought up something interesting too. When we talked about those particular bullet points around why do donors, have fatigue, and one was over solicitation, right? And then the other was lack of communication. So they seem to conflict one another. But when we think about that, right? When we think about that, the lack of communication in the way that I frame that is a lack of relevant communication, a lack of personalized communication. So again, it seems like they conflict one another, but your donors want to hear from you, outside of when you need another gift, and the frequency of communication isn't as important as the relevance of the communication.
I love that you framed it up that way. I think that's absolutely sage advice. And I think too that you never know in your communications, if you don't know what you're going to be getting, in some ways that's more exciting. If it's like, oh, and they're going to ask me for more money, it's easy to put that in the recycle bin. But if you're like, oh, well, what am I going to learn, or how am I going to be engaged? I think you have a greater shot at getting more depth in that relationship. Let's talk about taking action, because a lot of the things that we think about, okay, we've identified where this is happening. We've identified how it happens. And so we got to talk about how we make these corrections or prevent fatigue. And so what do you think that looks like?
Yeah, so it's more than a cup of coffee and a shot of caffeine, right? So that it takes more than that to combat donor fatigue. And some of the great recommendations here, Julie, around taking action, include personalized communications, which we've touched on just a little bit throughout this conversation, showing impact, bringing donors on site, Diversify the types of engagement. That is really important. Ask for volunteer action and discuss matching gifts or challenges so that their impact is perhaps doubled or tripled through those types of strategies. So showing impact, let's start there maybe, Julia. There are many different ways for organizations to show impact, whether that's a beautiful infographic that they're sharing with donors, whether it's a very organic and raw video that you're taking around, just look at the new fresh, paint that we had in the hallway or the offices, right? Just, whatever it might be, but that it's super organic and feels personalized. What else around showing impact? What are some other great examples of showing impact?
I have one that I just love. I was working with a group that does work in Africa, predominantly in Zambia, in rural Zambia, by the mines, and where education is really not an option for so many. And one of the things that we worked on was we got the executive director who was traveling to Zambia a new phone, and had him stand with students, and he did these, like, honest to goodness 10-15 second videos that could then immediately be texted back to the top donors in the States. And it was like, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I'm here with 3 of our students that you've helped support. We're standing in front of our new school, and we just want to say, thank you. And then because the Zambians speak English with a British accent, because it was a British protectorate, they engaged in some of these conversations. It was wildly successful.
I can see why.
Oh my God. Super inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
Took a little bit of thought. And I think we did it, if I'm not mistaken, literally, I think no more than we did 15 to 20 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like literally the top folks. That organization has lived off of that action for more than a year.
Wow.
Because they shared it, right? The people that received it, like, how often have you gotten a text message, text video from somebody that you engage with? Not very often.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It was, and your point, Tony, it was not like Hollywood produced. I mean, it was, somebody holding their phone, right? I mean, it was genuine.
Right, exactly. And what I love about those is that it really gives the donor or whoever is receiving the piece of communication the sense that you were top of mind.
Yeah.
Even if we know that there's probably some preliminary work, like we're going to do a couple of videos and these are the donors, but that the feeling and the organic nature really does send the sense of, as a donor, I was top of mind while you were there. Doing your work. So I think it's great. And my example around painted walls, I mean, we talk about a lot around donors, but this is also very relevant strategies for volunteer retention. And so, if you have volunteers doing work, maybe the volunteers painted the walls and now you're sending out the video saying, look at these great, walls that we have because of everyone's hard work. So
yeah. I think that's really smart, because we don't talk about volunteers as much as we should. And we're going to be talking more about that in upcoming episodes. But absolutely, that is something that's so important, especially if it's a corporate volunteer effort where an organization is like, okay, we're going to bring, 10 of our employees, or we're going to bring 100, whatever that number looks like. That is gold for those types of people, that are those types of organizations. And again, that inexpensive little video that just takes, oh my gosh, it doesn't take a lot of effort. You have to get out of your own head, I think, and say, this is not going to be perfectly produced. It's going to be raw,
right,
but it's going to be genuine.
Yep. I think the other important bullet point there that we talked about, Julia, was the diversification of engagement. So again, if we're collecting data and we're seeing maybe Gala attendance is dropping, So we need to think about other ways to engage those folks that might have historically come to a gala. Maybe they're ready for some other type of way to support and contribute to the organization. So really thinking about ways that you can diversify, and even those folks, right? So the folks that like to dress up and go to a gala and be there with their friends and see other community members that are supporting great work. Maybe the nighttime gala just isn't their thing anymore. So maybe we need to look at a brunch or a lunch to retain those individuals. So again, it's just diversifying the types of engagement. That means creating different lanes for folks to engage, but it also might mean, in the example of the gala, just kind of re-looking at that lane and how might we need to modify, that for the folks that typically attend. And again, that might mean moving something from nighttime to, daytime.
I love that you said that. I think that's really smart. I'm also seeing in our community, and I'd love to get your feedback before we move on because we don't have a lot of time, but I'm almost seeing like, and these are my words, like an executive dinner where you have maybe only like 10 couples or room for 20 or something like that, where it's a lot more intimate. People can chat and they can discuss. It kind of dovetails into that thought leadership. It's still lovely. It can be underwritten. I mean, it's I don't know. It just seems like it's more meaningful. And when you
Mhm.
have a smaller group of people, um, they kind of have to pay attention. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Mhm.
It's like in college when you go, your first year, you're in the big auditorium with everybody else and you can kind of zone out. But then as you move up into the years, you're in smaller seminars and you have to have done the work, right? You have to have done the homework and you have to, because you're going to be called upon.
Mhm.
But I'm seeing more of this, and I'm actually also seeing more of this where it's hosted in high-end homes from some of the high-end donors.
Mhm.
And so it's very intimate, but it's very powerful.
And it's really powerful when somebody opens up their home in that way. So you're entering the home of someone that really believes in the mission of the organization, and there's a heightened level of credibility that comes along with that when
Yeah.
someone says, "I believe in this so much that I'm willing to open up my home to have you come in and learn why this is so important to not only me but to our community."
Yeah. I think that's really cool. I think it's really a really important aspect too, especially in a time when there's still a lot of people that are not 100% comfortable about being in big events,
Mhm.
because of COVID and some of these other issues, the after effects of this. There's still a little reticence of some folks, wanting to be in bigger groups. So, last but not least, the power of gratitude. How important is this? Is this kind of just like one of those things that it's a handwritten note? I mean, what are your thoughts on this, Tony?
Yeah, so I mean, gratitude can be perceived and received in many different ways. But I think that, it benefits us all to kind of think about how we feel when we are donating either time, talent, or treasure to an organization. And remembering that in our own work. Do we feel relevant in the time, talent, or treasure that we've provided to an organization? Do we feel seen? Do we feel appreciated? So those are the things to keep in mind. Gratitude goes a long way. You can't ever thank anyone enough, in my opinion, but
Okay.
it needs to be genuine and authentic, not only in its messaging but in its delivery. So we could go for another half hour about all the different ways to express gratitude. But I'll fall back on my usual and say that as you build relationships with donors, particularly your larger donors, and you really get to know them, you'll get to know and understand what is meaningful to them in the space of gratitude and thankfulness.
Yeah. I've heard so many large corporate donors say, tell the nonprofit sector, I don't need another plaque.
Right.
I don't need that. It's expensive. I have no place to put it. Nobody sees. I think now, working from home, working from anywhere, it's even more salient because it's like we don't have that trophy shelf in the lobby anymore, right? That's being used or whatever. So how do we do these things? It seems to me, Tony, and this is, just kind of a thought I've had. It seems to me that we can be doing more gratitude marketing, or, using our corporate sponsors' names and logos on our in a digital way. We can do it on our websites. We can do it, in places where we have digital communications. And I'm wondering what you think about that, and if there's value to that.
If there's value to utilizing logos,
There,
like all of the great
yeah,
logos behind me.
yeah. You see where my mind is going here.
Well, I think a way to elevate gratitude for folks, and whether that's third sector company or your part-time controller, Bloomerang, JFT, and these are again just examples for the nonprofit show, and I've seen you do this, is to celebrate their accomplishments and their growth, and
Yes.
celebrate the great work that they're doing.
Mhm.
Uh, that's what takes the gratitude to the next level. It's more than you saying thank you for what you're doing for us, but thank you for what you're doing for the greater good,
Mhm.
uh, and celebrating that work.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's super cool. And I appreciate that. I think a lot of times we are hesitant to do that in the nonprofit sector because in some ways we don't want to eliminate who's giving because we're afraid of losing them to somebody else. It's like a competitive issue.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
And it's the ugly side, I think, of working from fear and not abundance. So it's kind of an interesting aspect of this. How do you feel about, and again, not a lot of time left, but I always love asking this question. How do you feel about swag? Do you feel that it's like necessary that when somebody comes on a tour, they're going to get the t-shirt or the water bottle or the pen and pad that's branded? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I don't know that I have a strong opinion.
Okay.
Really, I think that if you can invest in swag, if it works within your operating budget,
Mhm.
uh, and you don't feel like the majority of your donors are going to feel like that's wasted funds,
Okay.
then go for it, because I understand the marketing value of that, right? I understand going to the
Mhm.
grocery store and I see someone wearing the T-shirt from your
Yeah.
organization, and I'm like, oh, I've never heard of them, or I mean, I started my nonprofit career in mass market events like walkathons, bike-a-thons. So there was the logo of the event and the organization on the front, and then 30 or 40 logos on the back. And so folks wear those to the grocery store, to the gym, or when they're out walking. Uh, so they're great, they're great marketing for your organization and for your sponsors. So I don't think I have a strong opinion one way or the other. If it works within your budget, and you feel like you're in a community that's going to embrace that kind of investment, then definitely do it.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that you said that. I'm a big believer in the whole t-shirt thing. I think it's, generally an inexpensive thing to do. And yeah, you're standing in line at the grocery store and you see somebody with that t-shirt on or the logo. Yeah, I think it's interesting communication. I really do. And
But
so,
I also think that, I already went down a different kind of direction when you think about swag and all of that is, when you're creating event logos or your own organizational logo, think, is it a 2-color, a 3-color, a five
yeah,
color, and how that impacts the creation of, of swag. And that's something I learned the hard way, just through doing the work and ordering stuff and going, oh, it'll be a lot less expensive if it's a 2-color job than if it's a 5-color job. So anyway, I
exactly. No,
assume those still exist, some of those challenges around swag.
yeah, they do. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Hey, we from time to time do an ask and answer kind of grab bag episode. If you have questions, we had some really interesting questions last time we did this, and so send them to us. Info at American nonprofitacademy.com. You can find us both on social media. Reach out, and we always love hearing, um, what you're dealing with and getting some extra feedback. And if the two of us don't have an answer, we can find somebody who has an answer, right? So we love hearing what you're thinking about. We have these amazing partners, as Tony mentioned, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Fundraisers Friday, where we are here today, Your Part-Time Controller, Third Sector Company, and Clear Impact. These are the folks that join us day in and day out. Tony, have a great weekend.
You
Stay
too.
warm. I know you're in some snow today, and so I'm thinking of you. I think when before we went on air, you told us it was a brisk 27 degrees where you are.
Something like that. Yes.
I'm just mortified by that, but
Which is a heat wave compared to other places of the country. So
I know, true, true. Well, we leave with this message, and today it's all about bundling up and staying warm because I'm seeing that in my mind. And my message goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thanks, Tony.